In this video, let's focus on blending some of our shapes together. The first thing we need to do is create a boundary surface between this gap in our steering wheel. We're going to choose direction 1, the open end of our surface loft for our hand grip area, and the open end of our tachometer portion of our steering wheel. Let's apply a curvature to face relation. Now we can knit this new boundary surface to our lofted section. The next thing we need to do is start to create some of the profiles that will help guide our shapes together. To do this, we're going to need to create a split line and actually split this section of our loft. For that, let's create a sketch on our front face, and we're going to have to turn on some of our original curvature. We're going to be creating a spline. I'm going to start by adding a 2-point spline, snapping to the center points of our sections. This should get us close enough for what we need to do. To get a better understanding, we can turn on the centerline parameter for our tachometer section and the centerline parameter for the sweep for our lower portion of our steering wheel. But because we're blending the surfaces together in a more general fashion, we don't need to get that detailed. The next thing I want to do is add some straight lines that simply come back to points in space. Now notice the lower section here is going to have to blend in to roughly this area. So what I want to do is add another straight line that's going to intersect roughly with this area. This will allow me to trim some of the other geometry or split it. Now notice if we trim this section, we're actually removing the relation that we added and the handle that we added here. That's okay. We don't actually need this extra geometry. As long as we know that this is close enough, that'll be good for what we're doing. The next thing I want to do is add some fillets. I'm going to add a fillet in this corner and a fillet in this corner. We get an error because it'll remove the center point relation that we've added here, but this is okay. Again, these are all general sketch entities that we're adding. We're not being real specific. We're not defining them very specifically because we don't have any references to go by. I'm going to OK those fillets and exit the sketch. Next, we're going to go to our Curves drop-down menu and use Split Line. What we're going to do for our split face is select the faces of our lofted section of our steering wheel and the boundary section we knitted to it. Once you click OK, notice that we've actually broken up the two sections of our surfaces into multiple areas. This is going to be exactly what we need. The next thing we need to do is create a sketch on the side face of our steering wheel base. To make it easier, I'm going to go ahead and hide the area of our lofted section. Now we get a clear view of the faces we're dealing with. What we need to do is create some geometry here that will allow us to create a helper surface and help us drive the shapes that we're using. So I'm going to use a 2-point spline. I'm going to snap to the geometry for the thickness of our steering wheel base. We want to go ahead and add some dimensions. In this case, let's use 2 millimeters on each end. Then we want to induce some curvature. Now we can use this to create a helper surface, extruding it towards the center of our steering wheel. If we bring our split line lofted section back, we can now create a boundary surface going between one single edge here and our new helper surface. So direction 1, we're going to select the edge of our new helper surface, and we want to select the inner edge of our steering wheel split. Now we're not going to be using this entire section, so we're going to grab the endpoints and we're going to drag them to roughly the same width as the section that we're using from our extruded surface. So notice right now there's no curvature added. What we need to do is add some relations. For our extruded section, I'm going to use a tangency to face. For our split line section, I'm going to use a curvature to face. Now from here, I'm going to grab the arrows and drag the curvature to make sure it roughly equals the sketch picture we're dealing with. Also note that we don't want to cross over the filled surface we created for our steering wheel section. This will create some extra problems for us later when we're inducing the geometry. Now, one thing we can do, you can notice that the sketch picture actually looks like it's a little bit farther out. So we can go back to our extruded surface. We can modify some of these dimensions. So instead, let's use 4 millimeters and take a look at what we've created. So we've created a helper surface that's actually going to be used in final geometry to help us blend these shapes together. We can hide our extruded helper surface and move on to the next section. This concludes the beginning of blending surfaces.